Hi developers, I'm Hossein Abdullah, Microsoft MVP. Today we will learn how to create a crawler to collect data from the web. So the use case of using the crawler is, let's say you want to create an application that exposes the prices of the new cars. So first step, you want to go to the car buyers and get this data from their API. But unfortunately, there is no API. They don't have an API that is rich. They might have an API, but it doesn't have all the information you want, like the options, the price of all the models, and so on. So the solution might be creating a crawler. So because they expose this rich API in their website, in their HTML web pages, we will go to these HTML web pages, we'll download them, and we'll read them and try to extract the data that we need from these websites. So it's like not going to get data from the API endpoint, but get data from the HTML page of these vendors. That means we need tools to read, to first of all download the HTML, then parsing the HTML. For that, the tools we will be using today are the HTTP client libraries and also the HTML agility pack. So let's build our application or our method that will start a crawler to collect data to get the prices of cars, for example. So let's get started. So let's start by firing Visual Studio, and here I'll go and start by creating a new project, and let's choose the console application so that we can see that in action. So let's call it crawler demo. So to create a crawler, first of all we need to download the HTML content, and for that I'll go and use the HTTP client libraries. So I'll go to my project, right click and manage NuGet packages, and look for the HTTP client libraries, which is here, microsoft.net.http. Let's install this library. This one will help me to download the HTML content of the website that's using the HTTP client object. So that's done. Now I can go to my main method here and use that HTTP client object equal new HTTP client. Of course, we need to add the namespace system.net.http. Then we'll use that object to call the method getStringAsync and give it a URL. So let's say the URL I'm targeting is the one we have here. So that's gonna be my URL. So now I'll try to get HTML content from this URL. For that, I'll go and put the HTML here, and because getStringAsync is an async method, I need to add the await keyword, and with the await keyword I should use the async keyword, but with the main here I cannot use the async keyword. If I do, then my program will not run. It will not recognize that this method is the main method, because we should not change this signature. So to solve that problem, I'll go and create a new method. Let's call it start crawler, for example. Oops, with no equal here. So start crawler async, because it's an async method. And let's create that method. Should be an async method. and return the task. Now let's paste that code here, and here it accepts the await because here I have the async keyword. So now I have got the HTML code. So I'll try to execute this application, and here I should add console.readline so that I make sure that this code executes before my program exits. So let's try this one. So let's hit start, and let's make a breakpoint here so that I can see the value of HTML. So that's executed successfully, and here you see I am getting value from the HTML, which is the HTML of that page. So if I see it as a text, you see here it's an HTML content. See here we have all the scripts and links and div. So this is the HTML content of this web page. If I go and take a look at this web page by right click and here choosing view page source, you will see almost the same code as displayed in Visual Studio. Okay, so now that we have downloaded the HTML content, now we need to parse this HTML content. We can use the XML document or the XML object so that we can parse it as an XML document, but sometimes it doesn't work good for you because HTML might contain some other features not accepted in XML, because the way XML works and HTML are not the same way. For that, we'll use another solution to parse that HTML, which is the HTML agility pack. So let's install that library by going to our project, right click, manage NuGet packages again, and look for HTML agility pack. Let's install the HTML agility pack. Click OK. We are good. So now coming back to our program, here I'll go to use the HTML agility pack in order to parse this HTML content. For that, I'll call the HTML document equal new HTML document. Here it added the namespace HTML agility pack, which contains this here HTML document. We'll use the HTML document to load the HTML, which is of type string in my case here. So now the object HTML document understands the HTML content, and now we can go and parse the HTML content. So let's say HTML document dot document node, then go here and look for the descendants, for example. And before doing that, let's understand a little bit the structure of the HTML page we have here. So here the information we want to extract is these cars with this information, the name of the model, the image, and the price, with the link to each car. So before creating the crawler, we need to understand the HTML of this page. So let's right click and click inspect. Clicking inspect will get this window for you. This will help us to understand the structure of this page. So if I go node one by one and try to find the one the right div or the right HTML element that hosts each car. So I see here this div here is for this first car, and the first div is for the second car, and so on. So let's start by the first div here. If I expand that one, here you can see I have some information, almost all the information I need for this car. So I have the link to the car, and I have an image of that car. Then I have the name of the model, and also I have the price. So now let's try to extract this information from this HTML page. So I go back here, and here, because I need to get a list of all these cars, I'll go and try to get all these divs. So here we need to create or to set a criteria, because our HTML page contains some other divs for other things. So if I see here, for example, you see it have other divs for other content, but here we want the divs for exactly our cars here. So we can set a criteria, which in most cases is the name of the class used for these cars. So here you see all my divs here have the unique class, which is article new car, article last model, and the other divs do not use that class. So now I'm sure that if I look for the divs who have this class name, then I'll get exactly those divs for these cars only. So let's go here and try to find those divs. So the HTML, the document node have some methods here that can help me to find those divs. And here I have something called descendants. With descendants I can specify the element I'm looking for, which is a div. So here I'm telling the HTML node that I'm looking for elements that are a div in my HTML code. But because I have many divs, then I want to specify that I'm looking for the divs who have this class name. So let's copy this one, and let's specify that we want these exact divs by creating where here. So let's say that where the HTML node have that specific class name, and because here the class is an attribute inside the div, so you specify that get attribute value which have the name class. So we are looking for the attribute class, and telling that the attribute class should be equal to this value here. So let's copy this one here. So now we have all these divs. Let's convert them to a list, and now I have all the divs that all these divs for these cars. And let's get the response in a variable called divs, for example. Good. So now that we have all these divs, let's extract information from each div, because here each div is meant to be for a certain car. So for the first one, for example, you see here we have this information: the link, the image, the name of the model, and the price. So let's try to parse that information. For that, I'll go to my divs one by one, and for each div I'll try to extract information. So for the first div, I'll try to get, for example, the name of the model, which is here in this case BMW 015P. And because here I'm inside the div, so let's just run this up here and let's see the value of each div. So let's hit start so that you can understand it better. So here I have the value of the divs is 12 because here in my website I have 12 cars. Let's see it again. So it's 12, and for each div it have the HTML inside that div. You see here it embeds the information about the price and also other information about the model name and so on. So it's like embedding all these div element here. Inside that div, because it have the name of the model inside this h2 element, then we'll go to that h2 element and get the text content of that element. The way to do that is by going to div.descendants, and descendants is responsible for getting all the descendant elements from inside this exact div. The descendant we are looking for is the h2, because here the name of my model is inside the h2 element. So let's call the h2, and if I just call the h2, it will get me all these elements. The h2 is the content, but I want only the content or the text of inside this element. And the way to get the text is by calling here the inner because here, before going to the text, here descendants is of type enumerable, and inside my div I only have one h2. So I'm sure here that if I call the first or default, then I'll get this only h2 element. And when I get inside that element, I'll go and call the inner text property, which will give me the text inside that h2 element, which is in my case here BMW 015P. So let's put it inside a variable, call it name, for example. And let's run our application and put another breakpoint here so that we can see the value of name in each time. So you see the first value, it's BMW 315P, and let's click F5 again, and now I'm getting the name of the second car, which is BMW Series 3. So that's good. Now we have got the name of that model. Now we want some other information, like let's say now we want the price of this car. So here it's indicating the price in DT. So let's try to get that value, and let's create a price value, and here again call the div descendants, and let's see the price here. It's inside another div, which is inside my big div, and inside my div here, because I have only one div, as I have only one h2, then I go and call my first div So again, call my first or default div descendant, and here inside the div, if I can call the inner text, and in that case I will get all the text embedded inside this div. In this case, it's à partir de 87 918. Okay, that was in French. So let's call the inner text to get that value. Let's run this application again and let's see if we get that price right. So we see here for the first price it's à partir de this value, which is that same exact value we were looking at. It's 87900. So it is 87900. Click F5 to see the second price, which is 100,900. So that's right. Good. So now we have the name and we have the price of that model. Now we want to get also the image URL, because here each model have a unique image. So let's create the image URL variable, inside of which we'll go to the div, to the descendants, and look for where we have the URL image. It's here, it's inside the image img element. Let's go to the first or default img element. Then you see the link here is inside the src attribute. So let's call the attribute child attributes. Child attributes enable us to access the attributes inside an element. So the attribute we want to access here is our src attribute. So let's call src. And because here it returns a list of attributes, let's again call the first or default attribute and then try to get the value of that attribute, which will be here our image URL. With the same way, we can get, let's say, the link to this car, because here you see this div embeds a link to this car, which is inside the A element here and inside the href attribute. So let's create a variable link equal div.descendants and look for the A descendants, because here it's inside the A element. Then go to the first or default one. Then look for child attributes and specifically the href one, and again call the value first or default, then we call value. Let's execute this code now and let's see it in action. So let's look for the first car, which is here BMW 1 Series, this price and this image. Let's go, so it have that name, that price, and that right image URL, and also get the link to that image. That link gives us more information about that car. So now that's extremely good. Now we have extracted HTML content from this web page. Good. Here I'm having some recommendations from ReSharper, because here in my div it in some cases it might be null. For that, I need to check for each value if it's not null. So this is a new syntax in C#. I think the version 6. This mark here to tell that if the div is not null, then I can go and check the descendants. So it's like saying if div not null, then inside that if I can go to the descendants and again check if the div dot descendants is not null, then I can go to the first or default. So instead of doing the if statement, we can just use this mark here before the point, and in each time the compiler will resolve that for us. So this is really a unique and useful feature in C#6. Let's add those here. Good. Another thing we want to do here is to try to collect these data, because here in this code, in each time I collect a data of a car, I lose the information about the previous car. So let's create a list in which we have information about all these cars, not only the one car. So let's make this application even better by creating a model. So let's say I have a public class, call it a car. For example, this car class will have the information related to the model, the car model, and also information about the price. The price here is still a string, but of course you can go and convert it to an integer. Let's call this one the price, and let's add some other two properties of type string also, to call them link. Link, and another one for the image URL. Cool. So now we can store that data inside a list here. Let's say now we can create a list of cars, and in each time I collect this information, I'll go to create a car. So let's say var car equal new car, and then I can reuse this code here, and instead of declaring each time, I'll go and call the model of the car to get that value, and here it should be common, then the value of the price, then the image URL, and the last value will be the value of the link. Good, so now we have collected the list of cars. Now we need to add that car to our list by calling cars.add and pass that car here. Let's execute this again, and let's see the values here. Let's now try to look at the value of cars. So we have 12 cars. Each car have this information related to the image URL, link, model, and price. So that's good. Actually, I want to add something here, because here you see I don't get useful information from this window here. I only get the index of each car, but I want to see the name of the car right here, so that I don't go to each car and expand its properties. So the way to do that is by going here to the class, the car class, and add debugger display property, and inside this debugger display property we can specify that inside this debugger display we want to display the model and the price. Here we should specify the attributes inside this columns. So let's now specify the price. Good, so this model is right, this model of course, and this price should be the same name here. So now if I go to start, then you will see a better display of the cars list. So you see here we get the name, the model, and the price for each car. So this is of course a better display for the cars object. Good. So now, until now, we have gone to this web page and downloaded the HTML content by using the HTTP client libraries, then using the HTML agility pack to extract information from this web page. So that now we have created, extracted the data that we need from this web page. Cool.